Some reporter asked me once, what is your favorite music? Without thinking, I said, my own. If he'd asked me, what do you think of the best music, I wouldn't have dared say that. But it's mine because it came from me. And every note really is what I felt God was giving me to write. I never have written a note saying, I would like it to do this or I would like it to do that. I'd listen and feel, and that's what came out. And I have to admit, I feel very blessed that this music has come through me. I don't consider it my music, really. It just, it was given to me. Well, I've got a number of questions here, and I will do my best to answer them. Now that's the spirit. Thank you. Oh boy. Sorry, everybody. How do you develop receptivity on the spiritual path? That's a very important question. To begin with, you must be non-attached. It's not like going to the horse races and say, come on, Seabiscuit, or whatever you're called, your favorite horse. You have to just say, whatever God wills, I accept. The other thing is that you have to accept it joyfully, not like a toad under the harrow. There has to be a sense of whatever is God's will, I'm happy to see happen. I think one of the most important things in receptivity is relaxation. Because as soon as it's the heart that has to be receptive, not the mind. Many times the mind will be receptive, but the heart won't be. Doesn't mean a thing. The heart has to be receptive. If you with your mind say, well, I accept anything, but your heart says, oh, no, I don't, your heart will roll. The heart rolls the head in these things. And so relax your heart, not your body so much. Physical relaxation is an aid to relaxing the heart. But the most important thing is, in that relaxation, offer your life up to God. So to be receptive, it doesn't come without relaxation. It would help you to visualize yourself as a chalice. And you turn that chalice up, because if it isn't turned upright, it won't be able to, whatever you pour into it will pour out. So you have to hold it up to God. Secondly, you have to have it empty. If the chalice is full, you can't put anything more into it. How do you empty that chalice? By not having desires. Now that's not so easy to do, it's easy to say. But how do you get rid of desires? Always offer them to God. It's a steady, long-term practice. It's not something you can do, all right, I guess from now on I'm receptive. Not that easy. What you need to do is always in your meditation and every night, thank you. This is water, I presume.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Always, every night before you go to bed, it would help you to just mentally offer everything back to God. Your body, your life, your ambitions, everything. Mind you, one thought that would help you a lot to know. God is not a tyrant. He's not going to say, okay, you've given me everything, now I can put the screws on. He really wants your happiness. And you will find that if you give it to Him, this is what I've learned in life. Of various options, He often would give me the one I would have least wanted. But I always found in the end, if I sincerely gave it to Him, it was the only one that would have worked. The others looked good, looked possible, looked promising, but in the end they all fell apart. The door that if He slams doors in your face, Don't say, oh, you're being cruel to me. Because the truth is, and this is more and more true the more you live for him, the truth is that he is only closing off these channels to open up something better. He is not a tyrant. He is your friend. And as a friend, he doesn't want to strip you of everything except to give you everything. So sometimes it looks like he's stripping you. Yes, it does. And more so, the more you seriously want to give everything to him. If your desire is tepid, he'll satisfy your desires because that's where you are. He takes into account where you are. When people say to me, however, oh, Master or God or Divine Mother or whoever got me this wonderful apartment, I always cringe a little bit inside when I hear that, because I don't think God really is in the business of genie. You know, you rub the lamp and suddenly, I don't think he's really into that. I think the most important thing is that you try to do his will. And you have to accept it. You see, this path is a very varied thing. God deals with us according to our level of understanding, purity, refinement, and the kind of test that he gives people who are really sincere, he wouldn't give it to people who aren't all that deep into it. They would consider it sheer misery. But you know, it's not a misery. If you've really, now I'm coming from a life of just having given everything to God, so I tend to be what some people might consider austere in this attitude, because I really don't care at all what he gives me. I'm perfectly happy with it. I don't expect everybody to be there. But I do remember this beautiful story of Saint Teresa of Avila. Master used to quote that story because she had many physical tests and trials. And toward the end of her life, she was still in service to God, trying to start new monasteries. She was on her way in wintertime to found a new monastery, and they came to a river that was in full spate. And as they were fording this river, the horse lost its feet and swept her into the water. And she was an old woman, and she was completely bathed in water. Her companions thought she was dead. But all of a sudden she found herself on the opposite bank, her clothes completely dry, and Jesus Christ was standing in front of her. And he said, Teresa, don't feel too badly. This is how I treat all my friends. And her answer was the one that is a classic answer. She said, ah, my Lord, no wonder you have so few. Now, mind you, thank you. Now, mind you, that sort of thing, God wouldn't give you that kind of test unless you had already shown that you didn't have any ego desires. He tests according to your strength. And some people, what would be a terrible test for them, for somebody who's farther along the path, he just thinks, oh, doesn't even think about it. So you have to take into account where you are. As I said, God is no tyrant. God has all the time in the world for you to come to him, not just one lifetime, eternity. So you have to measure your own strength as to how much he wants of you. But the truth is that gradually it begins to dawn on you that he never asks you anything for your misery. Always what he takes away is to give you something better. He's not in the business of making people suffer. He is in the business, if you want to use that term. Doesn't seem quite right, but never mind. You know what I mean. He's in the business of helping us to find happiness. And if he takes something away, it's to give us something better. You know, I was thrown out of SRF on my ear for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with the truth. And it was extremely painful to me because my entire life was dedicated to that way of serving my guru and God. It looked as if I had been robbed of everything I believed in. It was a terrible experience for me. But this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that. I wouldn't have been able to write any books. Although Master told me to write books, they wouldn't have published them. I wouldn't have been able to write music. I wouldn't have been able to start communities. In fact, I wouldn't have been able to do anything, although Master told me repeatedly, you have a great work to do. I would have just been sort of tiptoeing in Dhyamata's shadow. I couldn't have done anything else. They wouldn't have let me. It was necessary for me to be thrown out in order to open the door to other things. In fact, it's very interesting. Just 1 month before that happened to me, I was reading an article in Span magazine, which is the U.S. Information Service magazine in India. And in that, it was written by the head of the philosophy department of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he was talking about all the reasons that people with their knowledge of science today have for believing that there are no values, there is no moral truth, there is no God, there is no to everything. And I looked at this, I read this article, and I thought, oh, how I'd love to write a book answering these attitudes, because I saw that they were demonstrably false, not because I didn't like them. In terms of their own reasoning, they didn't work. I'd had a good schooling in the kind of insights and understanding that showed that those were just a fog bank. There was nothing behind them. And I thought, oh, I'd love to write that book. A month later, I was put out. I had the chance to write it. And I did write it. And now it had another name first. It's called Out of the Labyrinth. And then I wrote a sequel to that, which isn't so much billed as a sequel, but it really is. And I finished that. It came out in its final version in March of this year, called Hope for a Better World. And what I have done, as I said yesterday, is basically take on the big guns of Western thought. But I've done it in a very good way. If you haven't read that book, especially in the last edition, because I finally had the time after deadlines and so on to sit back and relax and say it exactly as I wanted to. It isn't that anything that I said I disagreed with or didn't like or thought was mistaken. It's that I didn't, because if you're going to take on these deep thinkers, you have to do it in a way that at least is going to be enjoyable to read. So I had to work on examples that would be really interesting, fun, style, to work on the style to make it more flowing, and all those things that make for good writing. And so I put a lot of energy for many months into that. So if you've got the book but haven't read the 4th edition, please get the 4th edition. Anyway, in that book, I've taken on these people in terms of their logic. I haven't done it the way the average minister would. Well, I don't like that, and therefore this is what's wrong with it. I've tried to show how their own logic doesn't work. And I've tried to do it with sympathy. Now, that was a real test for me. To go into the camp of the enemy and try to see things from his point of view, that was no easy task. Took me about 16 years to write that first book. And the second one took a bit of time, not that long, but it was a tough book to write too. But I'm very pleased with both books because they show truth in a way that the most so-called advanced modern thinker will have to say, that does make sense. I can accept this kind of reasoning. Well, I couldn't have done that in SRF. It was a great blessing to me. So I thank God. But boy, when Ananda Mohima, that great Indian saint that is described in Autobiography of a Yogi, she wrote to me or sent me a message. She didn't actually write. She said, take this as your guru's blessing. I thought, that is one word I cannot accept. But it turned out to be true. It was a great blessing. You will see, and I've seen it repeatedly, that even hard tests turn out to be for your blessing and for your good if you give it to God. Receptivity is essential, but it's got to be a receptivity of love. It should not be a receptivity of resentment. Well, guess I've got to do it because you're doing it to me and I'm stuck. I can't do nothing about it and so on. No. Say, God, you know best. That's not always easy to say when it doesn't look like the best to you. But you'll see that the sooner you get that attitude, the more everything does work out. Whereas if you kick against these things, then it takes a little longer. Relaxation, especially of the heart. And I've found that a very good technique for developing receptivity is, at night again, build a mental bonfire and cast into it every seed of desire that you have. Now, people may say, yeah, but still I would like to make that $1 million. Okay, then offer it up to God. There's no harm in that. He knows your heart. Don't come on false with him. But say, God, I would like this. Help me to do it in a good way. Help me to have a good, to make money for a good cause. Help me to help other people. Help me to do it to serve your will. Or if I really just want it for me, then help me to understand things more deeply. Wherever you are, he knows your thoughts. Don't try to hide them. But you will see that the more you offer yourself as you are, quite sincerely, the more you will see that these things begin to fall away. And things that seem very important to you at one point suddenly cease to have any meaning at all. Not because you become more and more apathetic, not at all. Simply because you find that you are finding a level of joy that these things can't touch. It's sort of like what Master said, that somebody used to love stale cheese. Somebody came to him one day and said, try this mozzarella, it's really good. I mentioned mozzarella because Phil was talking about mozzarella, and I live in Italy where they have really good mozzarella, especially in Napoli. And mozzarella di bufala, or buffalo mozzarella. And so this man said, try this. And he said, oh, no, I prefer my cheese. Well, he said, just try it. And he tried it, and he said, oh, that's much better. He lost the taste for the stale cheese. So you don't have to say, oh, I mustn't like these things, but I want them. Just try to find something better. And the more you meditate, the more you try to do the right thing. You can't get rid of things that are not good for you if you have that desire. But you can at least do things that are good for you. And it's sort of like if you've got a thorn in your skin, take another thorn and get rid of that thorn, and then you can throw both thorns away. So really the best way to get rid of harmful tendencies, and most people have some, is to do good things. And in this case, a good way to do them is to do opposite things that help you to overcome, that are similar to well, I'll give you an example. I was in Switzerland many years ago, and I saw a beautiful Madonna, beautifully carved. And it was $12, which nowadays doesn't seem like much. For then, I don't suppose it was very much. But when you're on a monk's allowance of $20 a month, it can seem quite a bit, especially when you've already spent more than that on presents for people. And I really wanted it, but I didn't like the idea of becoming a prisoner to it. So I thought, well, I will have the pleasure of buying it, and I will buy it for somebody else. So you see, I had the satisfaction of buying it, but I wasn't held by it because I gave it. Now that's the way you can use action to overcome wrong tendencies. When you want to hurt somebody, try to help that person. When you want to be selfish, try to be generous. By right action, you'll see that bit by bit, it's sort of like scales. And you put enough on the right side, and gradually the negative side comes up. So no matter what your tendencies are, you can't get rid of them. As Master often said, You can't get rid of darkness in a room by beating at it with a stick. Turn the light on. If you have harmful tendencies, self-destructive tendencies, perfectly normal. Don't say, oh, how awful I am, because what you're really doing is criticizing the whole human race, let's face it. Everybody's got something, or most people have something. But if you say, okay, but at least I can do something good too, you'll see that in the process of doing that good, whatever it might be, and the more you can make it, this is the good thing of karma yoga, right action. It gradually transfers your energy. Now this is another point in the Bhagavad Gita that's very important. You see, that whole first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita talks about the good and evil tendencies. And Arjuna, at the end of the Gita, first chapter, is saying, oh, I don't want to kill my own relatives. You see, in the legend, excuse me, in the allegory, these are related. These two sides of these armies are related to each other. And he's saying it would be a sin to kill my own relatives. Now you see what that's really saying is, these negative tendencies, whatever they may be, they're a part of myself. How can I get rid of myself? It would be terrible to kill myself. But you see, Alan, try to wake up. I mean, I'm trying hard. If you'd like to sleep, you can. I'm sorry, he's my secretary. So, I hope he doesn't mind. If you realize that every tendency that you've got is not you, it does not define you. No tendency defines you. Nothing defines you, in fact. Ultimately, you are triguna rahitam, beyond all the three gunas, beyond all the qualities. Everything that you've got that you think defines you doesn't define you at all. It defines your personality, yeah. But that personality changes. The worst, there's a very interesting story. A painter, an artist, wanted to paint the Last Supper. And he got a young man who looked so holy and beautiful, and he decided he would make a perfect model for Jesus Christ. So he used him to paint Jesus Christ, and he took a long time making this painting. And after some years, he was looking for a model of Judas. And he wanted somebody who looked depraved and dark and ugly. I don't think Judas really was like that, but he wanted that kind of person. And he found somebody who fitted the bill perfectly. So he asked him to serve as a model. Later he discovered that it was the same man. Isn't that strange? But I remember, I've seen people who, when their consciousness changes, everything about them changes. You couldn't even recognize them. Now, it could be a change for the good, too. That people who look, I've seen this happen so many times at our retreats, that people come with very worldly attitudes, and after even a few days, what to speak of months, you wouldn't recognize them. Master said someday you'll be so changed you won't even know yourself. That which the greatest saint has accomplished, you can accomplish. Don't hypnotize yourself by saying, that's the kind of person I am. You aren't. You can become as holy, as sweet, as kindly, as joyful, as forgiving, as any master, as any saint who ever lived. What it is simply energy that's directed. So in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, these teachings are you can take them on several levels. Krishna says that the soul never dies. And even if your body dies, it's really just like changing your overcoat. And he's saying this in 2 levels. obviously the one, that you never die. You can't die. Death is the one option not open to you, let's put it that way. You simply have no choice but to live. You've been doing it for billions of years. You have no choice in the matter. You might as well get to like it. I remember saying to Master many years ago, "Sir, I don't want to have to lecture." He said, "You'd better learn to like it. That's what you're going to have to do." Well, it's the same with everything that we are. We'd better learn to like who we are and what we have to do. But the thing is that whoever we are, as we've defined ourselves, is simply energy going in that way, self-defined in that direction. And once you've withdrawn the energy from, let's say, meanness, cruelty, selfishness, lust, anger, whatever it might be, that same energy turned in a new direction doesn't die. There's no such thing as death. The energy you put out simply transforms into another avenue of expression. So your own tendency to be anger is the same energy. You don't starve a part of yourself in deciding, all right, I'm not going to get angry anymore, damn it. Rather, what you see is that the same energy goes toward forgiveness, kindness, all these things. In fact, what happens is that you gain energy every time you go toward virtue, because you're more in tune with the source of energy. So whereas you see that people who don't have much energy are pretty dull, their eyes are dull, the closer people are to that source of virtue, the happier they are, the more energy they have. It's not only that you don't lose life, you gain life. So the thing is, to be receptive means to offer yourself up to life itself. It's not going against what you really want, although it may seem to be going against what you want, but what you want and what you really want are often poles apart. What God wants for you is what your soul really wants. What your ego wants for you is often what your soul would like to get away from. So, okay. Now, if I go on at this rate, I'm not going to answer all these questions. The music that flows through you has touched so many souls and brought me to tears of joy so often. Do you have any plans for new instrumental or choral music in the near future? Well, I'm touched by that statement, and I also often feel tears of joy when I listen to this music, or when I sing this music, or when I compose this music. Often, I've composed it with tears flowing down my cheeks. But no, I don't plan to write anymore. Now you may say, why not? Well, I'm 77. I have to think of optimizing my time. I have certain books that I feel that Master wants me to finish. And I've said what I had to say through music. And I never wrote it with any desire to write music. It just came to me to do so as a way of serving. And I've never felt the slightest compulsion for it. In fact, I was amazed when the thought to write music first came to me. It had never occurred to me. But I was in Yosemite Park in California, and I saw a couple of young boys, men, sitting on a railing of a bridge, playing the guitar. And I felt in the mood to sing. I've always loved singing. And I said, well, I'd like to sing for you. They said, sure. Well, I couldn't think of anything. I mean, I've been working on the railroad and roll out the barrel. Sure, I knew Indian bhajans, I knew master songs, but somehow I didn't think that would go over. And Divine Mother, it didn't seem like quite the right kind of music. So I sang Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which did occur to me as a good song and a spiritual. And they said, oh, you've got to come and sing for us tonight. And so I said, sure. I just was in the mood to sing. Singing, I did study singing. And again, I'm not singing much these days because of bronchitis, but it's always been a joy of mine. So I went to this party and sang. Well, again, Swing low, sweet chariot. But everybody said, oh, please sing again. And I just really had run dry. So the next morning I was leaving Yosemite, and I thought, well, that's a lovely way to share. I'd been thrown out of SRF, and I was looking for ways to serve. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could go around singing? But I thought, what in heaven's name am I going to sing? Popular songs are just, the sentiments are just not my sentiments. I had studied voice, but you know, most of the classical songs are the same stupid sentiments. Oh, cessate di piagarmi. Oh, stop bugging me and let me die is basically what the... just not quite what I really felt to sing. And I thought, well, what can I do? I can't sing Master's chants to just ordinary audiences. What can I do? And all of a sudden, there came into my mind, just full-blown, a song. And I stopped at a milkshake stand and wrote the song out on a paper napkin. And when I got home to my parents' house, I was still just sort of in the limbo, not knowing what to do with my life. And I found that my brother had left a good Martin guitar there and didn't need it. So I went out and bought a book on how to play the guitar and began writing songs. And each song had a message that I wanted to share. So it was meaningful to me. But I found that the melodies, too, were nice melodies. And I found I had a certain talent that way. Granted, I had flunked music composition at Brown University, but that's really because I never went to class and never did any... I just wasn't interested in these things. But at any rate, 1 month later, somebody said, well, how'd you like to give a concert? And mind you, my level of stupidity, I said yes. The reason I said yes was that I thought at least it would force me to practice. So boy, did I practice. That whole week I did nothing but play the guitar. And I wrote a couple of more songs that same day, in fact, of the concert. And so I had 5 of my own, plus some Indian songs. And I figured if I gave them songs they could understand in English, I could throw in others and tell some stories. And I figured it would be okay. So I wasn't too worried until I got to the hall. There were 200 people there. The hall was completely packed, and they had wanted to create atmosphere. So they had all the lights out. There was only one candle on the mantelpiece behind me. Well, boy, if I needed anything in the world at that moment, it was to see the strings of this guitar. I couldn't see them. So it was a bit of a... one of those tests you read about. But you know, it did work well, and people did enjoy it. And somebody later said, you know, I'm a music major at the university here, and those are some pretty interesting chords you... Anyway, I launched my, you might say, career that way. Since then, I've written about 400 pieces of music, and yes, I do love it. But I've said what I had to say, and I have a lot more to write in books, and who knows how much longer I'll live. A lot of people are kicking the bucket at my age. I may hang around a little bit longer. I hope it's not too long, but I hope it's long enough to finish these things, because I do have, as I said, several books that I still have in mind. And thank you for loving this music, and I have to say I, too, love this music. It's not mine, it's his. I listen. You know, it was very good that I didn't know music composition. It was a help. It was a great hindrance, of course. But what made it a help was that I had no facile answers. When you know what chord sequences are open, you use them. I didn't know. I would play a chord and I'd really like it. 2 notes later, I'd forget what that chord was. And I'd have to work very hard to go back and find the damn thing. And then you have to think about chord progressions and so on. I didn't follow the rules, but I discovered that there are rules. Some things work, some things don't work. It's that simple. But because I didn't know the rules, I found new things too. it's sort of not to compare myself with St. Francis in any other way, but when he started to rebuild the temple at San Damiano, the church there, the chapel, he didn't know architecture, and he had to build an arch, but didn't know how to do it, so he discovered a new arch. And in fact, that's been recognized as one of the standard ways to build an arch. Well, that's what I did. I had to do with music, and some of my discoveries were really good discoveries, and many people are delighted to hear them. I know I have somebody who helps with arrangement now. I didn't in those days, and he'll get a chord, and I'll say, that doesn't work. He said, well, what chord? I said, I don't know. Come with me. And so I go to a keyboard and I play the chord, and he says, oh, you mean G7 something? I don't know what he's talking about. But I say, yeah, that one. And he recognizes it, and it works. It's not that he says, well, you can't do that. I know it works. And if Mozart himself were to come to me and say, that's the wrong chord or that's the wrong melodic sequence, I'd say, I'm sorry, but it is the right one for what I'm trying to say. There's no question in my mind. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know what I might be doing. I just know what I'm doing here because I hear it, and it's the right thing. So anyway, I wish I could answer, yes, I'm going to write lots more, because it would be lovely. But 400's not a bad introduction. We don't hear very much of those 400 even. Dear Swamiji, as an artist, how may one balance a desire to express higher truths and God's love with one's inner struggles and negativity that often spill on the canvas unconsciously? Thus, the end result might be a painting that expresses sadness, alienation, frustration, or other darker feelings along with higher aspirations. Now, that's a tough one for me. I have never written from any personal desire. And I put myself in different positions and try to write music, particularly, that expresses that, but it's always from a higher point of view. And so I haven't had frustrations to vent or anger to vent. And even when, it's very interesting, because that song of mine, Darra Sorrows, you know the song in Mystic Harp 1? Darra was a woman in Ireland centuries ago. She's sort of become legendary, maybe it is only legend. And she was lured back to Ireland. She had escaped because the king wanted her, and she was in love with another man. And so she escaped Ireland in order to marry this other man. And the king pretended to be sorry and asked her to come back and promised not to do anything. And as soon as they came back, he killed her husband and tried to get her back. And so she committed suicide on her husband's body. That's not a cheerful story. And I wanted to write that story. And I wanted to write it in such a way that it wouldn't pull people down. So I asked her soul to sing it to me. Now, did she live? I don't even know if she lived. But I really heard her singing it from a state of liberation from that thing centuries later. And in that consciousness of liberation, that melody came to me. And it's a very intense melody, but you'll notice there's something at the end that lifts. And it's not an easy one. For example, at the end, you have the drum. And that moment is when she kills herself. You might call it a downer. But somehow that melody doesn't pull you down. I think that the trick is this. You see, when you find liberation, when you find freedom from all past karma. This was very interesting. A woman came to me. She's a well-known singer in French opera. And she said that because she has an alto voice, she has to play the part of these heavies. And she says, I meditate, I do Kriya. How can I play this part and still feel inspired, not feel pulled down by these very negative roles that I'm supposed to sing? And I told her this thing, that when the soul reaches the point where it is free from ego, it still looks back and sees all the things that it's done wrong in the past. It doesn't create new karma. This is the state known as Jivan Mukta, freed while living, because there's no sense of ego anymore. But you still have the karma of the past that you have to pay off. You look back and see yourself as a tyrant, as a pirate, as an unscrupulous merchant, as who knows what. All the things you've been, good, bad, and indifferent. And you look at them all from God's point of view. You see God playing in those roles. You're not identified with them anymore. And so you give it back to God. You see, God has played that role through me. Now I release that role. And indeed, in one lifetime, in one meditation, you can release a whole lifetime by going through these things in vision. This takes a high degree of spiritual realization. But the thing is that you look at those things and you don't at that point say, oh, what an evil man I was. You say God was making mistakes. He learned his lesson. I give it back to him. You see, it's very different. There's freedom and there's joy in that. And if you can look at your negative feelings, because I certainly had to be able to identify with them. When I wrote that song, what is it for? Walking alone, alone, what is it for? Walking alone. I had to have the consciousness of somebody who's lonely, somebody who's in the midst of life and feels cut off from life. I had to have that consciousness, but I didn't feel at all lonely or unhappy. I saw myself in that role and free. I saw myself in the role of Deirdre and free. And so in everything that I wrote, there was always a touch of freedom, because I would always offer it up to God and feel that one song, where has my love gone? Long are the nights, now that she's left me, dimmed my delights. Where is my love, friend? Passed she this way? Saw you her smile? Ah, what did she say? There's pain in that song. But when people sing it with pain, I say you're not singing it right. The essence of the song and the way to sing it and the way to understand it is to understand it with joy. Like the last stanza, which says, there by my bed she left me a note. Can you explain these words that she wrote? Seek me, she said, love, out on the sea. Boundless the reaches of true love must be. You see, there's freedom in that. And so the melody itself, although there's pain in it, it's not painful. And when you hear it, you feel joy. So you do it disservice if you sing it with a heavy voice. There's not a song that I've written that hasn't been offered to God and felt with that freedom. I think you can do that with your feelings. I don't feel anger. I don't think I ever have, really, or at least not for many, many years. I don't remember what it's like. But I know what it's like. I can identify with it. I'm not stupid. And if I write a song that has anger in it, then I do it in such a way that there's calmness behind that anger. You can do that with lines. You know, there are many tricks to understanding this too. In art, if you're a painter, which I guess from this note that when you say I'm an artist, you mean a painter. Thick, heavy lines, dark, muddy colors, these things express ego, anger, passion. The colors you use, the lines that you use, the more there can be delicacy, the more there can be an upsweep instead of a downward thing. I know I wanted to write, I did a slideshow of Romania. Much of my music's been written around slideshows because the slideshows help me to focalize what I'm trying to say. And so I did one of Romania, where as you know, I grew up there. And Dracula, there was no legend of Dracula. In fact, Dracula in Romanian simply means the devil. Safir al Dracula, go to the devil is the way they say it. But Dracula, there was also a ruler there called Vlad Dracul, which means, Vlad was his name, Dracula means the devil. Such as we say the Henry VIII or William the Conqueror or whatever, he was Vlad the devil, because he was not a very nice person. He would impale something like 60,000 people at a time, the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect your mother to be pleased by. And so they wrote this legend about Dracula, but there's no such thing there in Romania. Anyway, because it's a hot tourist attraction, Romania has tried to make it a tourist attraction. They show you Vlad Dracula's castle. In fact, it was written long after he died, and my mother said that she went to a party there, and it was altogether a different scene. But in my slideshow, I'm at the top of the stairs looking like this, just for fun. Anyway, I wanted to write a melody that would say Dracula to go with that picture. And I didn't know what to do. I don't feel at all demonic. So I said, well, God, give me a melody. And all of a sudden there it was. I just had my hands on the keyboard. And this has happened 2 or 3 times. I just said, help me to know. And I found my hands were moving. Not automatic writing, but sort of going along with the inspiration I felt. And the melody went da, 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 da. And it was just perfect. I had a great laugh over it. But there's no sense of horror or fear. It's good fun. You can understand. But downward moving lines generally go toward negativity. Upward lines go toward something more positive. There are certain rules, like the first beat of a measure expresses the ego. Da, 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 you know? That's I want this. Swing music's full of that kind of thing. And in painting, lighter colors instead of heavy colors, you can help that way. But how do you express anger? Okay, you don't want to suppress it. If you feel anger, it's really a good thing. But my feeling is, why dump your negativity? Why not try to offer it in order to overcome your negativity? Now that's different. You can say, God, I feel angry, but help me to understand it in such a way that it won't pull other people down too. Why should I dump my negativity on others? So you look at a scene and you express it, but you try to, I think one good answer to anger is humor. Try to put it humorously. Oh, I don't know, there are a million answers. But the more you try to turn it toward God, you're not suppressing, you're transmuting. And you'll find that a lot of seemingly negative things, damn this cold, this bronchitis. I had a lot of fun. I don't know how many of you know the play that I wrote, the Peace Treaty. But here are these lords who were using very clever reasoning. I mean, when you write, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's talking. You can't impose his dialogue on him. And if he's smart, he's got to express his negativity cleverly. You can't make it look obviously stupid if he's intelligent. They were talking very intelligently, but very wrongly. Devilishly ingenious, but damnably wrong. I had a lot of fun writing their roles. I was just thinking, how villainous can they be? But I could always see that they were expressing what was a delusion. And finally, they lost, because they weren't right. But from their point of view, you have to be true to what you're doing. And I don't believe in namby-pamby art. I do believe in being sincere, but I do believe in trying to introduce your own higher self into what you're doing, as if you're doing it from a level of higher consciousness. This woman opera singer said that it really helped her. People, even though she was playing the part of these villains or villainesses, felt inspired. That's in fact what it should be. There should be some joy, even in the darkest thing. Work for that. I don't know how to explain it more exactly. I might have a better idea if I could see what you're talking about. But in principle, I think this works. What practices do you recommend to feel God's presence throughout all the experiences of daily life, such as deadlines at work, disciplining your children, your spouse's short temper, and, well, we all know those things are very real. And I have lots of deadlines in my life, and I can't just say, oh, ho, hum, I'm very peaceful. No, you've got to meet them. You've got to be real. I don't ask you to be unreal. I ask you to have your feet on the ground. But do it with God. You'll find that the more you do it with Him, the more He guides you in the right direction. And there have been times in the past when I felt that I needed to write a very strong letter. And so I did. I felt that I should write it. But then, here's a question that I felt that I needed to answer. I felt the need to write it. But was that person ready to hear it? That's another issue. And so I would ask God, should I send this letter? Sometimes I would feel a certain nervousness which told me, no, don't. So I would throw it away. But I think that we need to address these issues in a real way. There was a woman who told me a very interesting story. She was a devotee of Yogananda. Her husband was very anti-Yogananda. And he was ranting and railing in the car one time. And she looked at Yogananda's photograph and she said, Master, make him shut up. In that moment, he stopped talking. He was completely silent until they got home. He brought her into the house, didn't say a word. You'll be surprised how much prayer can help. May not always be as effective as that one, which is a pretty good one. But you'll see that the more you bring God into what you're doing, the more things do work for you. But we've all got times when we just wonder, how can I cling to God? Master told this story once too. He said, I was working so hard for God that I felt that I was forgetting God. And then I realized that in that very thought I was remembering Him. So He won't let you go if you hang on. But you've got to be real in what you do. I don't at all counsel going off to an ivory tower and feeling that you're above it. Do what you have to do, but do it for Him. At least 2 Ananda centers are located very near large gambling casinos. 1, what are your thoughts on this? 2, would you ever indulge in a game of blackjack? To tell you the truth, I just don't like gambling. And Divine Mother seems to be with me on that. I'll never forget one time I was with my parents at a dinner party, and they wanted to play bridge. And they wanted me to join them. And they wanted to play for a penny a point, which is really nothing. But I thought, Divine Mother, I just don't like to gamble. I've gambled all my life, but not for money. I've had to take great chances in building Ananda, but never for money. And I said, Divine Mother, I want to be an obedient son, and so you have to help me out of this mess. Do you know what my score was? I didn't want to win, I didn't want to lose. My score was 0. That's the chances are astronomically against that. But somehow she helped me out. No, I don't. I don't like gambling. It's too. It's earning money without doing anything for it, and it's usually losing it. And it does things to people. I heard about a couple in Reno, and they were playing two slot machines side by side. And the man fell over with a heart attack. The ambulance came. They rushed him to the hospital. And during this entire scene, which must have been mildly dramatic, his wife was standing there shoving money in that slot machine. Perhaps not even knowing, perhaps not even caring, I don't know. But it does things to people. It's not a good thing. I really am very against it. And that may come from a past life of having suffered from it. I don't know. Sometimes you need to go through these things to understand. But you know, with that attitude, it's odd that the first money I won in life, I won by gambling. I was 6 months old. My parents invested they invested some money and got back 500. So I got $500 before I reached the age of reason. But since then, I just haven't. So I don't know how to answer that question beyond that, but I've never noticed that there was any temptation in Ananda people for this. I'm so happy to be here in your presence. I'm uplifted, inspired, enlightened. Thank you for their time here. I'm delighted. I am a painter. In the past, my work has been based on capturing beauty, recording in a sense the beauty I see, feel, and experience in the visible world. I am also now inspired to be a clear channel of divine light and inspiration, and am indeed experiencing floods of inspiration regarding the work I would like to do. This is great. Would you please speak about the importance of art as a spiritual path and the channel of art as a healing force in the world? Honestly, I feel very deeply on that subject. That's why I've written music. That's why I've done some paintings. That's why I've taken 15,000 photographs. All my life, in a sense, has been dedicated to the arts. And in writing and in poetry, I believe in making things beautiful. And I think that it should be for God. I don't, it's a matter of taste, I suppose, in a way. But I really think that we should do things for the glory of God. And that means to do them beautifully. I have been to ashrams where the saints had no interest in these things. I honor that attitude. But I also, it's not my nature. So that's a question of perhaps predilection, I don't know. Yogananda was this way too. If he hadn't been, I'd have tried to overcome it as a fault, maybe, I don't know. But he endorsed it. And I do think that we should do our best to make holy whatever we do. Now, art is we just finished a festival of the joyful arts at Ananda Community in California. And we tried to show how the arts can be a channel for divine inspiration. I know they can be. You listen to some music, it just thrills you. You listen to other music, it makes you feel heavy. Even the plants respond. When you play rock music to plants, they try to scramble out of their planter boxes to get away from the loudspeaker. When you play beautiful music, they send out tendrils as if to embrace the loudspeaker. There's something in nature that does that. But art is important for basically one reason. I talked about chitta, feeling. Feeling is the essence of consciousness. The arts touch that essence. And therefore I think the arts are very important because they can ennoble the feelings. They can uplift the feelings. And without feeling you can't advance spiritually. That's why music, Yogananda used to say, chanting is half the battle. Music, spiritual music, is very important. And to think that you can play rock and roll rhythm and melody and put in Jesus loves you, Forget it. That won't do anything at all. It isn't the words, it's the music, it's the beat that'll pull you down. But there's another aspect to that, and that is that all of life can be an art. And if you understand it, how can we make our lives more graceful? An accountant can do that. A businessman can do that. A cook can do that. Everything we do, we should try to introduce grace and beauty and feeling. And when a person cooks and puts feeling and love in her cooking, that can help people. That's why many swamis in India like to cook, because they feel it's a way of serving people, of giving them vibrations and blessings. Don't think. Although the arts as such are a wonderful way of communicating spiritual inspiration, don't think they're the only way. If you don't have, I was just with a niece of mine this earlier today, and she said that she just doesn't have what it takes to be a writer. Well, okay, so she isn't a writer. Not everybody is an artist of any kind. What do? Are you lost? Not at all. There's so many ways of doing things gracefully, doing them beautifully. You know, that's one of the things I love about Italy. They do things and they do it with style somehow. I used to look at cars on the highway, and I would notice that if I liked a car, if I liked the lines of the car, it was almost invariably a Japanese car. They have a sense for line, they have a sense for beauty. I would say develop that sense. When I did that logo, you know, Joy is Within Us, the Ananda logo, I had to do about 75 experiments before I could get just the right curve that would express joy. Now, how can a curve express joy? I don't know. All I can say is it did. And you know, a doctor. There are a lot of doctors who just go by the book. But a healer is something different. A healer puts love into his patients. A healer thinks of this patient as a person, not just a car in a garage. And he can do things for his patients that no doctor can replicate. This goes beyond the book, but all life goes beyond the book. And you'll find that people who are really good at their trade, whatever it might be, they are more than technicians. They are artists. So try to give everything to God, to feel God working through you, to feel that flow, and you'll see that in everything there's a way of bringing God into it that can transform not only your life, but many people's lives. How important is it to take part in chanting, singing with others as opposed to sitting and listening while others sing? Well, I'll tell you one thing, if you're tone deaf, I'd just as soon you didn't sing. It's certainly good to sing, but you have to decide. You know, in my old age, I really don't feel like singing all that much. It's inside. I listen, but I also chant mentally usually. In my own meditations, I don't very often sing. Singing was such an important part of my life when I was young. You know, I would walk through the streets of a city singing at the top of my voice. I don't know, people probably thought I was crazy, but that was how I was. And I just enjoyed singing. And even with that temperament, I just tend to take it more inside now. You have to decide for yourself. But basically speaking, if you can sing in such a way that you don't offend other people's ears, if you enjoy singing, then why not? But if you really want to take it inside, the deeper chanting is mental. So take it from there. Muchas gracias. There seem to be so many techniques to learn and virtues to develop on the spiritual path. Along with daily meditation, can you recommend a few basic practices, principles, postures, whatever, that lead to God realization? You know, when I bought a typewriter. I was 17 years old. And I bought a book that told me how to type. And for a week, I did all the exercises, and it was very complex. But after a week, I knew the touch system. Now, I thought that, well, I'm going to be a writer. I want to be a writer. I'm not interested in numbers. And I figure I'll pick up those numbers over the years as I go along. Do you know that now, what is it, 50 years later, 60 years later, 60 years later, I still don't know where those numbers are. I still have to look. And I can touch type without looking at the keyboard. It's good to know techniques, and it's good to learn them in the right way, and it's good to learn them one by one and not just figure, well, I'll get the hang of it. It's good to be specific. But then you want to go beyond that, but don't go beyond it until you've gotten to it. Okay? And yes, it isn't something you learn all at once, so do it one thing at a time. And you don't need all the techniques. Master said, to do 100th part of what are in my lessons is enough to find God. He gave us many things because things will appeal to different temperaments. So don't feel that, huff, puff, I've got to get it all. No, you decide. But don't sell technique short because it really is important. Some of these things I could answer at greater length, but I've gone on much too long already, and I'll be stopping in a few minutes. How can I distinguish difficulties that are beneficial for me to overcome from hindrances and distractions which I should turn away from? That's not an easy question to answer. And the reason it's not is because it's so much a matter of an individual and inner feeling. Now, I know of people, I've met people, who if they're about to go downtown, and as they're going out of the house, they trip over a carpet and turn the corner of the carpet, they think, oh, God doesn't want me to go out. That's pretty ridiculous. Use your common sense. There are deep things that you feel you must do, and you know you have to do. I knew I had to start a community. I first wanted to start it when I was 15. I vowed that I would do it when Master urged us to. I'm the only person in all that crowd who has fulfilled that pleading on his part. And there were many reasons I could have said, well, God doesn't want it, because there were many, many obstacles. And people used to say to me, you can't succeed. Nobody's ever succeeded. I said, what's the issue? I'm not doing it to succeed. I'm doing it because I've got to do it. You have to do it according to what you feel guided to do. And if it's a deep thing, obstacles can be a good thing for you, because you only grow strong with obstacles. And I've had plenty of obstacles. In fact, in my horoscope, I have a grand cross, all the big planets opposing each other in the fixed signs. Some astrologer in Germany, speaking of me, says, I don't know how he can stand that horoscope. Some astrologer in San Francisco looked at my horoscope and said, well, this person will either commit suicide or have a great success. You're looking at somebody who's used to these things, used to obstacles. And but I always have to feel, is it right? If I don't feel it, then I'll take a sign. One of the things that I consider a sign is if what I'm doing looks like it's going to create disharmony with other people. If they don't like it, I don't consider that disharmony. But if it upsets on another level, I won't do it. I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody else. So if I see that, many times, for example, I've wanted to do something at Ananda, and I haven't done it because I saw people weren't ready for it. And I thought, well, then I don't want to impose anything on anybody. But if I see that it's right time and they're understanding it, then I will do my best. It's so hard to set any known rules, but I'd say 2-3 things or so, just a handful of things. One is, be guided by not how people like it or don't like it. You can't help their likes and dislikes. But if it's really going to upset things, if it's going to hurt people, don't do it. That's a good sign. I know that when Master was going to go to India, for 3 years in a row he was going to go, and I was to go with him. And so although I was very young on the path, he was having me go, but being young, I didn't know certain things. And each year he had to cancel it, but one year, one of the older disciples pretended to know his plans. And I thought, well, he's an older disciple, he must know, because I was young. And so I told him. I wasn't supposed to tell, but I had thought he must know, and because of that presumption, this disciple became very upset and went to Master and said, what's going to become of me, leaving me in this state, and so on. And Master had to cancel it because he saw it would hurt him. It wouldn't have hurt him, but Master didn't want to do anything that would hurt somebody. That's an example. He said he had been waiting for Divine Mother to give him a sign as to whether he should do it or not do it. So because of my stupidity, or whatever you want to call it, he canceled that trip. And as a result, he never did go to India before his passing. 3 years in a row, and then he left his body. And I'm at fault, and it hurts me to think of that, but so it is. There are times in your life when you have to consider it. Is it going to upset? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to create disharmony? If so, don't. But everything you do is going to create another kind of disharmony. People won't like it, especially if it's good. You can't worry about that. Their likes and dislikes don't matter. I'm talking of another kind of distress. Don't subject other people to that. Don't be a cause of disharmony on that level. Those are guidelines. I don't know how much further to take it. But don't ever just barrel through saying, God wants it and I don't care what you want. That's not the divine way. Well, I'd better quit, hadn't I? Yeah? It's 5:30? There are a lot of questions here. I can't answer them all. A philosophical question. One is born a prince, another one a crack something or other, I don't know the word. They have not the same, I guess it means baby, crack baby? Is that an expression? Somebody who's addicted from birth, is that it? They have not the same blessings nor the same opportunities. What is the relationship between karma, choice, and freedom? Is there such a thing as freedom within the confines of karma? Well, that's a very different question. In fact, that's not much of a question. You're born with your karma. You're born because of the things you've done. If you've died with this passion for drugs, you'll be born with that passion for drugs. This again is why it's not safe to take up drinking, because some people who died alcoholic have a deep-seated desire for alcohol, and even one drink is enough for such people to become alcoholics forever. So watch it. But your karma depends on your past. It's not God's will, it's not God's blessings. Yes, it's opportunities, but this isn't much of a question because I have to go so deeply into it. I'm not going to go into it. Could you speak about how to become more impersonal without losing feeling? Now that's an important question, because you have to be impersonal, but you have to be personal too. Okay, you don't have to, you keep your own personality out of it. That's being impersonal. But it doesn't mean that you're cold toward other people's feelings. Master was completely impersonal, but he didn't look at you coldly and say that's your problem. He felt deeply for our needs, our sorrows, our suffering. It's just that he wasn't touched by any such thing. You must feel people's, you must love people in a deep way, but not with attachment. Love them for their welfare, not for what you can get out of them. That's impersonal love. That's a quick answer. I could go into a long answer. I'm not going to have time for that. You emphasize the search for the self, who each of us is, who you are. To me, that is not important. It feels like taking myself too seriously if I delve into that I. I rather have lived a self-effacing life because I want to give of myself for God. Listen, that's a very easily misunderstood point, and a very important one to get right. We're not talking of how to put it. The real self has nothing to do with ego. Your real self is in everybody. And you're not denying yourself when you understand that you yourself are in all. When you give to others, there's joy in sharing. There's much more fulfilling than thinking I. This is a point that is, I know many people have misunderstood it. But, okay, Jesus, I don't think he'd have died on the cross if it had meant nothing but suffering for him. The best motive in life is bliss. He found bliss through doing it. He found bliss through giving to others. He found bliss through lifting their karma. But bliss should be the goal. Don't think of self-deprivation. It's the wrong basis for morality. In my books I've written, I really recommend that you read especially Hope for a Better World, where I talk of what Adam Smith wrote. When he wrote his book on economy, people were outraged because he said that a person, a baker, for example, he's not thinking of his customers. He's thinking of the money that he'll make from his customers. And people were outraged. They were saying, that's not Christian ethics. Well, right. He didn't put it right. He didn't ask the right questions. I suggested two types of bakers. I said there can be two bakers in town. One is Joe Baker, or William Baker, and the other, let's call him Joe Crumpet. And William Baker is thinking of his customers only in terms of what he can get out of them. And Joe Crumpet is thinking of his customers as friends. And what can he do for them? And of course he has to think of his own income. He has to be realistic. He too has a wife and children to support. He needs to think of income. But he doesn't think only of income. He does his work and also enjoys his customers. Now, the one is being selfish in a good way, and the other is being selfish in a bad way. And what makes it good is that he finds happiness doing that, whereas Joe Crumpet probably dies of ulcers. William Baker probably dies of ulcers. And you've gone into stores where people, I know I was in Taormina in Sicily one time, 3 years ago about, and I was looking for a hat. And this woman showed me a whole bunch of hats she had, and I said, well, I don't really know much about hats. I'm not used to wearing them, but I'm interested. Can you tell me what style of hats your customers like? Oh, I never ask. I don't care. I just take their money and let them go. I said, well, I said, okay, I can understand that attitude, but is it making you happy? And she had never had that question asked of her before. And I said, look, you've got to be here 8 hours a day, maybe more than that. Why not treat me and others who come as friends? We give you money, you give us a hat, okay, there's a financial exchange, but why think all day long, I'm going to get this from him and get that from him? I was a little frank with her, and we left it at that. She sort of had a sour expression, and I left without the hat. And I came back the next year, and I went into that shop. She greeted me like a friend. She wanted to hug me. She said, may I kiss you? So she kissed me on the cheek. And I went, we were given a bottle of wine in the hotel because we were repeat customers. So I took this bottle and gave it to her because I don't drink alcohol. And she was so moved. Well, you see, I made a friend. But she understood from that she can make friends of customers. Why think of them only that way? Life is so much more fun if you think that way. And when you go into stores where people have that attitude normally, you feel that they're friends. I've got a lot of friends among the storekeepers in Italy. And because I come in as a friend, because I will sometimes haggle over the price, but I always try to think what's fair for both. And if I think that I'm doing more than will be good for them, I just don't want it. Sometimes they'll offer me a price, and I'll say, no, that's not good for you. I won't take it, because I feel they need it too. But in this way, I have people who are eager to sell me things at a good price because they like me. That's the way that life can be beautiful. We don't have to think of dog-eat-dog lives. We can be friends with everybody and feel that everybody that we're working with is cooperating with us, and we're cooperating with them. And we give and they give, and that way we all gain. With that spirit, life can be beautiful. And it doesn't have to be just going off and chanting Om. In your most practical things, you find that there is sweetness. I don't have time for more. I've gone a little bit longer than I said I would, but thank you all. God bless you.